In this video, we're going to look at the most common way everyone adds notes into Xplan. So I'm in a client record. I'm going to click on the icon strip so I can see the client menu. I'll just collapse this. And now we're going to click on notes. And in most Xplan sites that I've seen, notes is really prominent on the client menu. So because Xplan is customizable, it might be a little bit higher, a little bit lower. Once you get there, it does the same thing. So I'll click on the icon strip again. Let's collapse the menu. So I'm not going to go through all the panels. I'll do that in another video. So I'll just collapse the ones that I'm not using. Let's start with a concept first, okay? So you can see that this client record is about Romeo and Julia. And I'll just bring this Word document up. However, it's actually two records in the background. So the official name, I think, in Xplan is a record, but I like to call it a file or a folder, okay? So they're just presented together because when we created the client, we said that they are partnered. But if they were to divorce or one of them were to pass away, would actually make it more obvious that it was two separate records. So with that in mind, now where it says entity selector, I can say, right, whose record am I looking at? If it says the client, then when I click add, it adds a note into that person's record. And also what I view down here is notes only in that record. Now, if I change the entity selector to partner, you can see that there has been a slight change. There's a different note there. This is Julia's information. And then I can change it to both. So this is all their notes. And if you had a related entity like a company or a trust or in Australia a self-managed super fund, then there would be another selection called all, and you can see the notes for all those entities there. So what we'll do now is we'll actually add a note. So I'm leaving it as both and I'm clicking on add. The add document note window appears and I'll take you to related, and this is really cool. It's actually adding a note to both the client and partner. And if you're new to Xplan, maybe you're thinking, isn't that obvious? But it actually wasn't this way last year when I looked at it. Last year, all I could do was maybe click on one of them, add a note, and I had to manually add the second person in, and it was super annoying. So yeah, super happy about this. But I'm jumping the gun, so let's come back to the first tab, which is summary. In the summary tab, you need to select your type and your subtype. And your practice manager or licensee probably would have given you some guidelines on which types and subtypes to use. What you see on my screen is probably different to what you see on your screen because these choices are set up by the site administrator. So the reason why it's important to select a type or a subtype and not just leave it as the first one or not just say everything is general is because in future you're going to have so many notes. You're going to want to find what you want quickly and you'll be able to filter by types and by subtypes, all right? The other reason why it's important is because some practices use cases. Now, I won't go too deep into cases. It's a way to collect information about a piece of work and also have benchmarks, which are checklists to tick off. And one of your benchmarks for, let's say, a review piece of work might be have a review meeting. And it could say, well, to tick that benchmark checklist off, there needs to be a note that is type meeting and then subtype review. Okay, so if you're not using the right types and subtypes, it won't tick off that benchmark checklist. Next one along is who can see this note, and just leave it as shared with my groups. Usually everyone else in my group are my colleagues in my practice. That's a sort of simplified explanation. With the date, this is the date that the note relates to. So if you had a meeting yesterday, you would go ahead and you would change the date to yesterday. So for that reason, I don't see a need to write the date again in the subject, but maybe your practice has a different naming convention. So just stick with what your practice manager wants you to do. With the subject, you can put one in. It's actually really important to have a naming convention because if you think about the lifespan of your client, maybe, 20 years or so, there's going to be so many notes, right? You want to have a naming convention where it's easy to find it in future. So what I would usually do if it's not something obvious like a review meeting, is to have something like the provider number and the policy number, and then maybe if it was a claim, I'd put that number in too, and then a little dash, and then what it's about. Okay, and then for that situation, of course, you use the right type and subtype. So that might be insurance claim, or if it was an application, say application. All right. So yeah, maybe check with your practice manager what the naming convention she wants you to use is. Please, 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 please don't put something ridiculous like client called. Client called about what? Okay. So not helpful in the future when you're trying to go back and look for notes. Okay, so that's the subject. If I click on privilege, it seems to nominate who can edit or delete. But, editing and deleting, that in itself is set up by the site administrator. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure about these. You'd come down here and you'd add in your information. All right, you do have the ability to do some formatting, bullets or colors and such. So that's the summary tab. Let's move on to the attachment tab. So you can add attachments by clicking upload file. As far as I know, this is the only place that you can drag and drop files in Xplan. So I will just bring one across. Notice the color. When I bring my mouse up, it turns to a different shade. That's when I know I can drop my document in. In this drop down, you could delete all the attachments if you've uploaded the wrong one. You can't actually rename yet. It would probably have been better to gray this out for now, but I'll show you renaming later on after we've saved this note. Next tab along is related, and these three tick boxes dictate if these people can read the note. So if your client has a login to Client Portal, can they read this note? If you have given your referrer and professional advisor login into Xplan, can they read the note? You won't be able to tick this box, shared with all clients on site. There is a very specific use case to when this would actually be useful. So what this does is it would share this one note to every client on your Xplan site. So let's say that all your clients had a client portal login. You wanted to notify all of them of your Christmas hours. And so you would make a note, tick shared with all clients on site, and boom, they'd all get it in their portal. That's literally the only use case I can think of. And anyway, you're not going to be able to do it because it's always locked down, so no one accidentally mucks up all the client records. This one down here is whose record is this note saved into? So it's not like the note saves in my client's record and then there's a copy in the partner's record. It's actually one note kind of saved into both, pointing at both, okay? So in my example before, if I had one note saved to all client records, it'd be one note saved into like 3,000 records. Now, if this note didn't relate to Julia, you would tick against her name and you would remove. And if you went, oh no, it is actually relating to her, you would click on add and you would type her in, press enter on your keyboard or click on the search. And even though there's only one Julia that comes up, you still need to click on her so that it's highlighted and then click on OK. All right, so let's pause for a little while. My biggest bugbear is when you have, a client and partner, and they've both been your client for the last 10 years or so, but every single note has only been saved into the client record out of laziness, okay? Because, yeah, it is true in the past, you would always have to make a note for one entity, click add to add the second person in. So out of, maybe laziness, that's not very nice to say. For whatever reason, the partner wasn't added in. And that really bugs me because what happens if they divorce or, one person passes away? You would make it more obvious that it's two client records. It would be split. And then whoever is the advisor for Julia would go and read her notes. And there's literally nothing. But she's been our client for 10 years. To me, it's not just cutting time in admin work. To me, it's diminishing the value of her as a legit client who has been paying us fees for the past 10 years. We couldn't be bothered to make sure that there were notes about her. So I used to sort of hint that if I found out that we hadn't been saving notes properly, I'd make whoever created the note go back and fix it up one by one. But yeah, in reality, you can actually fix it up in bulk. So yeah, I think you can tell this is a big bugbear of mine, which probably is going to be solved now because now you can select the entity selector as both and then click on add. So it's probably not going to happen so much anymore. All right, ignore the last two at the bottom. Doubt you're ever going to use it. Next one along is associations. So I think this is fairly new in Australia. Like maybe it came in maybe 2, 3 years ago, but I think it's been in UK Xplan for a while. And so this is the ability to say that this note relates to this product. So if you have saved information about their superannuation fund or their insurance product in Xplan, you can now associate and say this note relates to this product. And so what you would do is you would click link product. I could say, oh, this is about Romeo's product and go search, although I could just say life insurance. I think life insurance relates to life, trauma, and TPD. I can't imagine it's only life. And then you would click on search. Okay. All right. So I've only added one product in, so that's the only one. So just to show you, I would tick it and I would go OK. And there it is. And then if I pressed X, that's to unlink it again. And if you had linked it, then when you went into the product on the left-hand side menu, there is actually a section for notes. So it's almost like when you're in the product, and if you'd done all this linking, you could just go and read the notes straight away. You wouldn't have to go out and come to the notes section. So I think that's beneficial. But then having said that, since it's only been around for 2 years, it's not like you'd have notes older than 2 years because it's not like everyone's going to go back and back link up all their notes. So it may be just something you start doing now, and eventually you'd be able to trust that all the notes were linked properly. The last tab is workflows. And so you could kick off a case or thread. Those are workflows from the note. I haven't actually ever done that, but I could see how it could be useful. But this one, if your practice is using cases, you will definitely be using this at some point. So this is just to associate this note with the case so that it's collecting information for a piece of work together, or it's ticking off a benchmark checklist. If you had a case active against this client, you'd actually be able to click and select from it. You can see I don't. All right, so that was a lot of explanations. As always, don't forget to click save and close. And there's my new note. All right, review meeting. I'm going to make another note. Maybe I'll just make it for the client and I'll click on add. And what I want to show you is that if your practice manager or your licensee has created templates for you, you can actually pick it up by clicking on template. Sometimes it's organized into folders. Sometimes it just runs down. So I'll click into this folder and I'll just pick one up. Maybe I'll say SOA presentation meeting notes. I didn't create these, so let's just see what they look like. I click on it and it drops in. All right, so the type is set for me, the subtype's set for me, the date will always default to today. You go fix it up. The subject's there. You can change it. It's just a starting point, and then you edit as appropriate. So I'll give you 2 use cases. I've seen really fancy, like super fancy templates where they have made it beautifully colored and templated with coding to automatically drop in information. And so I've actually seen a licensee make one for their ROAs. So they drop an ROA, it's a table, they fill it in, and it's sort of beautiful. And they click save and close, and ta-da, the ROA is done. For myself, I actually used to have a template for initial client meetings. And so it have the right type and subtype, the right subject, all these sort of prompts. So it's a bit easier for the advisor to pop in information. And then with the attachment, I actually had the FSG attached because you're always going to provide it, right? So why am I forcing whoever's making notes to upload the FSG each time? And then it was on me as the practice manager to make sure that whenever the FSG changed, I changed it in the template. It's not everyone else's problem. One person is in charge of making sure the templates work, okay? And again, templates are great to make sure that they tick off case benchmarks or case checklists because all the types and subtypes are correct. I'm not actually 100% sure whether in a template we can attach a case here. I can't remember. So when I get to making videos about cases, I'll make sure to come back and check that out. All right, I'll go save and close. So I hope that's been helpful. I know it's been a lot of information because I added in all my personal opinions on top of it. But yeah, if this was useful, then please share it on. Hope you have a really nice rest of the day, and I'll see you in the next video about notes.